morning, everybody, and welcome to another Breakfast by the Bay. My name is Captain Megan, and behind the camera today we have Mr. Jeff, and we are joining you today from our Exploration Center and Aquarium here in Newport. So today we are going to be talking about one of my favorite animals that lives in Narragansett Bay, the horseshoe crab. And we're going to be answering a couple questions to figure out why these horseshoe crabs are so extraordinary. So we're going to be answering some questions such as, is a horseshoe crab really a crab? Why are they the ultimate survivors? Why is their blood blue? Why is their blood their super secret superpower? And lastly, how does their blood help us humans? So let's get started. The first question that we're going to answer is a horseshoe crab really a crab? The answer is no. Horseshoe crabs are not really a crab. They belong to a family called arthropods. So they are more closely related to scorpions and spiders than they are to other crabs. Now, there are 4 species of horseshoe crabs found in the world. 3 species are found in Southeast Asia, and 1 species, the Atlantic horseshoe crab, is found right here in North America. And it can be found all the way from Maine, all the way down to Mexico. So let's revisit looking at our horseshoe crabs real quick before we answer our other questions. So I have a special treat for you today. I know Mr. Jeff talked about some of our horseshoe crab adaptations before. We have our little baby horseshoe crab here. Thought it would be awesome to show you kind of their size when they start out. They start out a lot smaller than this. But here's our baby horseshoe crab. And remember, the horseshoe crabs have 3 different parts to them. They have their helmet, their abdomen, and their telson. So let's put the baby horseshoe crab back. We'll look at the bigger horseshoe crab real quick so we can see their features just a little bit better. So remember, they have their helmet, which contains their compound eyes, 1 on each side. They have their abdomen, and then they have their telson, or their tail. And remember, that tail is not used for stinging or to harm anything. It's simply used to help flip them over. And then remember, the other side of our horseshoe crab, we have all of its legs, and then we have its mouth right in the center. And then if she flips open again, we might get a good look at her gills. So she has some book gills. And again, her telson. There we go, we can see her gills right there. Awesome. So that's just a quick reminder of what our horseshoe crab friends look like in real life. So let's get back to our questions that we're going to answer. All right, our next question is going to be, why are horseshoe crabs the ultimate survivors? Well, first off, horseshoe crabs have been around on Earth for over 400 million years. Yes, you heard me right, over 400 million years. So in that time, they have survived all of the Earth's changes. So just to highlight a few so you can kind of understand why they're the ultimate survivors, Earth has gone through several different ice ages. So our Earth temperatures have cooled down a lot, warmed up, cooled down, warmed up. That temperature change didn't seem to bother the horseshoe crabs one bit. Also, they survived what is known as the Great Dying. So about 225 million years ago, about 95% of all marine life went extinct. But not our horseshoe crab friends. They also survived the formation and the subsequent breaking up of Pangea. So all of the continents and the land masses moving around to the spots that they are in today did not bother the horseshoe crabs one bit. And then lastly, they survived that asteroid impact that impacted our Earth about 65 million years ago and wiped out about 75% of all life on Earth, including the dinosaurs. So after going through all of that and surviving for over 400 million years, I would call the horseshoe crabs the ultimate survivors. Awesome. All right, our next question we're going to jump to is, why is horseshoe crab blood blue? Well, you can see over here, this is a picture of actual horseshoe crab blood. Now, horseshoe crab blood is blue because it contains copper. Horseshoe crabs have something called hemocyanin in them that help them transport oxygen throughout their body, and within that hemocyanin is copper. So when their blood is oxygenated, it turns that light blue color. You can compare that to ours, where we have hemoglobin in our system that helps carry the oxygen, and ours is iron-based. So when our blood is oxygenated, it's that red color that we see it. All right, our next question we are going to is, why is their blood their secret superpower? It's not because it's blue. To understand why it's their superpower, we first have to understand their circulatory system. So right here I have a couple different pictures, and horseshoe crabs have an open circulatory system. So that's this picture right here. We as humans have a closed circulatory system, which just means that our blood vessels travel throughout our body in our veins on this very nice and neat kind of like highway system. Whereas horseshoe crabs, like most invertebrates, animals without a backbone, have an open circulatory system, which means that their blood can travel throughout their body cavity. Now this is important to know if something harmful enters into the horseshoe crab. So if something harmful enters into the horseshoe crab, it can spread quickly throughout their body cavity and spread over a very large area. But don't worry, because they have a superpower, and it's called amoebocytes. And those amoebocytes protect against infections by viruses, fungi, and bacteria. Now this quite isn't the unusual part yet, because all animals have some sort of protective immune system. The superpower part is that these amoebocytes are super sensitive to something called endotoxins. So this is the bad guy right here, and he's called an endotoxin. And endotoxins are just molecules from cell walls of certain bacteria, including E. coli and Salmonella. So once these bacterial endotoxins enter into the horseshoe crabs, the super sensitive fighting amoebocytes will attack the endotoxins and kind of encase it and coagulate around it and encase it so that it can't spread any further. So that's their superpower of these sensitive amoebocytes, stopping these endotoxins right in their tracks. Now, endotoxins aren't just found in horseshoe crabs. They can be actually found in a lot of different things. And some of the things that they can be found in that are important to humans would be vaccines and medicine, and also surgical instruments, and then surgical equipment such as pacemakers, AEDs, and even the IVs that you might have to get when you go to the hospital. So, what scientists have to do is they have to make sure that they are testing this stuff for endotoxins to make sure that it doesn't enter into our blood. Because if it enters into our blood, we could get really, really sick. So let's get to our last question. How does the horseshoe crab blood help us? Well, to answer that question, we have to go back in time just a little bit. We have to go back into the 1950s. In the 1950s, there was a medical researcher named Frederick Bang, and he was studying the open circulatory system of horseshoe crabs. And he was the one to notice that these amoebocytes will attack and kind of coagulate around the endotoxin. And if he had any endotoxins in his sample, it would become this gelled mass, and he would know that there are endotoxins present. So fast forward a little bit, and in 1977, the U.S. Food and Drug Administration approved using horseshoe crab blood to test for these endotoxins on our medicines and vaccines and those medical equipment that I was talking about. So how exactly do they do this? Well, researchers will collect the horseshoe crab and they will drain some of their blood from them, and they will get an extract from that blood called LAL, which stands for Lumulus amoebocyte lysate. And again, it's just an extract from the horseshoe crab blood. Now the LAL cannot kill the endotoxins, but it can more act like a fire alarm to tell the scientists that there are endotoxins present and that we shouldn't use that batch of vaccines or those medical equipment on humans because it could contain harmful bacteria for us. So Mr. Jeff showed us that picture of those horseshoe crabs kind of up on a table and the needle going in them and their blood being drained. Now, in 2016, the International Union for Conservation unfortunately bumped the horseshoe crab up to vulnerable, which is one step below endangered. So over the years, scientists have definitely noticed a decrease in their population. Now when we talk about their decrease in their population, we definitely have to keep a few factors in mind. Some of the decrease in their population can certainly be from the medical field. The medical field collects over 600,000 crabs a year, but there's also other factors that may be threatening the horseshoe crabs as well, such as climate change, fishing, and habitat destruction. So fishermen will still use horseshoe crabs as bait. With climate change, we see a rise in sea level, and horseshoe crabs will lay their eggs on sandy beaches. So if we have a rise in the sea level, those beaches might become covered in water. They might not be able to lay their eggs there anymore. And then also with habitat destruction or habitat loss, humans love to build their houses and condos and resorts right near the beaches, but we just have to be really mindful about where we are building those beaches so that we don't take away any of those sandy beaches where eggs might be laid. Now, the good news is that also in 2016, a synthetic alternative was discovered instead of using the LAL and the horseshoe crab blood. And a lot of different countries in Europe began to use this synthetic alternative, and a few U.S. drug companies started to use it as well. But unfortunately, on June 1st, 2020, so only a few months ago, the American Pharmacopoeia, which sets the specific standards for drugs and other products, declined to place the synthetic alternative on equal footing with the horseshoe crab blood, claiming that its safety was unproven. So this synthetic alternative is out there, and scientists are still working to try to get it more widely used in the U.S. and get it to be proven that it's just as good as the horseshoe crab blood so that we can help their population. Now, when we collect these horseshoe crabs and we take their blood, we don't take all of their blood and we don't kill them. What happens is they drain about 30% of the horseshoe crab blood, and then they release the crabs back into the water. But this is where the data varies a lot. Some research has shown that 5% of the horseshoe crabs do not make it once they're released back into water, whereas some other data is showing that up to 30% of the horseshoe crabs don't make it once they are released back into the water. So scientists are still researching and looking out for the health of the horseshoe crabs, and maybe that synthetic alternative will become more widely used. But as of right now, we are still depending on the amazing superpower of the horseshoe crab blood. I'm going to leave you with this. If you decide to get your COVID vaccine, I would like you to thank a horseshoe crab. Because if you get that vaccine, that means that that was tested using that horseshoe crab extract and made it safe for you to have. So I hope that you guys learned a lot of information about these superpowers of the horseshoe crab. And I'll ask Mr. Jeff if there's any questions we need to answer before we leave. Awesome. All right, everybody, I hope that you enjoyed looking at the blood of the horseshoe crab, and we hope to see you next week on another Breakfast by the Bay. Bye, guys.